All right. We got how long till the feast? 27 days. So we got what, 3 classes until the feast. So I don't know if we're going to finish this in that amount of time. It's a lengthy chapter, but we'll see where we get. This is chapter 20 of the first book of Yisrayl, of making the connection with Yahweh. And we're going to be in, well, it's not chapter 17. It is chapter 20. It's the finishing work of the 7th messenger, number 5. That's it. That is it. 6 months left, clean up or burn. And we know, men, that the time now is extremely close. This was taken from the Feast of Tabernacles, 10/18 of 2003, and we're going to be covering pages 159 to 170 this evening. Well, we're not going to cover it all this evening, but this is what we're going to be in this part of the class here. The main subject of the sermon that we're going to be dealing with in the days of the 7th Malach, will be the finishing of Yahweh's 6,000-year plan, notice, and the resurrection. If you've read this book, this chapter is extremely exciting when you get into it and when you see what Pastor is showing us of what's going to be handed over to this house in a very short time period now. But before that authority, before those things are handed over, as Pastor has said, we're going to be going through this worst time of trouble, something that has never been seen before. And we know, and we did get just a little taste of it, this past week and a half ago with that cold snap that came through. And Yahweh willing, we learned a lot. We were shown where we have some deficiencies and where we can get better prepared. So, but this is where we are. This is in the days of the 7th Malach, the finishing plan, the finishing of Yahweh's 6,000-year plan, and the resurrection. So, if we go on to some scriptures that we're going to be reinforcing, and I'm only going to go through these this evening. I probably won't go through them again. We'll see if we need to. Isaiah 7:15, buddy and hunter will he eat, so that he will know to refuse evil and to choose righteousness. And that's in Isaiah 7:15. People think about honey and butter. It's always just something that goes together and it tastes great. Well, it's just like it is with the ashes of the red heifer. Those two items combined, when you have real butter and real honey, when they combine and they come together, those microorganisms and those enzymes and stuff that are combined there are doing something fantastic within the body. They're doing something fantastic within the brain. Although we might not see it, we might not be able to feel it, it is doing something. It is creating a benefit to us. Absolutely creating a benefit to us. And then we see in Deuteronomy 17, 9 through 11, this is something that we need to rehearse and reiterate constantly. Go to the priests who are Levites and the judge who is in office at that time and ask for their decision, and they will give you the sentence of judgment. Remember, it's been that way from the beginning. If you have questions, to receive an answer, ask where? Praise Yahweh, ask at Abel. You must act according to the sentence that they pronounce for you at the place Yahweh chooses, and be careful to do all that they order you to do. According to the law they teach you, you shall do. And this is the guidance that comes from this house. The guidance that we'll receive from our counselors comes from the law of Yahweh. It is a guidance. It is to keep us within the bounds of the law of Yahweh. It's to our benefit. And this is why we're told, according to the decisions they give you, you shall do. You must not turn aside to the right nor to the left for the sentence they pronounce for you. And it's because, it's for our protection and for our safety that we do adhere to and follow these things. In 1 Timothy 3:15, it says, but if I'm delayed, I write to you so that you can know the right and proper way to conduct yourself in the house of Yahweh, who are the called out ones of the living Father, the pillar and ground of the truth. Okay, so this is, again, something else that we learn here. The only place we ever learn how to properly conduct ourselves is here in the house of Yahweh. You're not going to learn the right and proper way to conduct yourself anywhere else but here. What does everywhere else base their teachings upon? Praise Yahweh, God worship, the gods of Hollywood. That's where people, that is their teacher, okay? Some vocabulary words. Vocabulary words to be on the lookout for. We're going to look out for Zion, which means an uplifted place or mark of Yahweh, okay? We're going to look out for the word deception. When you do, deception is when you do not fully know about a thing. You know, when we don't take time to learn, when we don't take time to look at everything, you know, that's deception. When you do not know fully about a thing. Iniquity should be very familiar to us, means not subject to the laws. To what laws are we talking about? We're talking about the laws of Yahweh. This word abound in Matthew 24:11 means to multiply. It means to cause to increase. It means to become in fullness. Again, we're going to see these words. These are just words I want you to keep in mind and be on the lookout for as we do progress through here. Okay, the abomination of desolation here. I'm trying to there we go. Okay, that's better. Okay, abomination of desolation. It's one that makes desolation possible. So who is it that makes desolation possible? That's also known as the Lord of the heavenly habitation. And we know who that is. The mountain is as shown in Matthew 24:16 is Yahweh's uplifted place. Remember, the mountain or the promotion of the house of Yahweh is Yahweh's uplifted place. This word time in Matthew 24:21, it means a time period, or it means a set time period. Okay, and we see years. And in Leviticus 25:8, it means to be complete, a completion, a revolution of time, or a whole. And then this word 7 here in Leviticus 25:8-9, it means by implication, it means a week. It means a week. Okay, so those are kind of the things to be on the lookout for as we do progress and as we do continue in our studies as we go through here. Okay, so if we start here on on verse 1 here on page 159, Pastor starts off here. He says, "Shalom, everyone. Praise Yahweh. You can be seated, and the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you." He says, "We've decided to wait until Passover for this ceremony here that he was teaching us about." He said, "I would that you would keep in mind what I would like you to keep in mind is what the disciples did before Passover." And this is a very fitting time because we're roughly a little over 3 weeks away from Yeshua's memorial and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So what is it that the disciples did? What was it that they did prior to the Passover? What? Okay. All right, let's take a look here. For cross-reference, if you want to take a look, in Luke 22:7-13, it gives us the idea. We're shown here in the scriptures what was taking place. And it shows here the day of the unleavened bread, verse 7, was coming up next, upon which the Passover lamb must be sacrificed. So he sent Kepha and Yachanan, saying, "Go." And look at the underlined word there. "Prepare for us the Passover in order that we might eat." And they said to him, "Where do you want us to prepare?" Notice the word prepare. There's something about this word prepare. And where do you want us to prepare? And then he said to them, "Behold, when you have entered the city, a man will meet you carrying a jar of water. Follow him to the house where he is going. Then you will say to the owner of that house, 'The teacher says to you, where's the guest room where my disciples can eat the Passover together?' And he will show you a large upper room already furnished." And notice the underlined word there again is "make ready there." So they went and they found it just as he had told them, and they made ready They made ready for the Passover. Okay, so you can see there, you can see where those underlined words are. You can see there's a footnote there, footnote number 2. You see that there on that one? And you see it again there. Well, this word, when you go to the footnotes here in the book of Yahweh, it shows this word prepare, translated from this Greek word, that Greek word that you see written there, meaning to prepare. It means to provide. It means to make ready. Referring to, notice what it's referring to. You know, not only do we make, think about this, man, not only do we make physical preparations for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which includes going forth, getting the leavening out of our houses, making sure that all of the leavening is removed, and it's removed from our houses and from our vehicles and from our clothes, and leavening is very, very small. Leavened bread can be very small. It can be crumbs, and it takes a really, really diligent effort to go through and to find all of that, doesn't it? Well, this make ready is referring to an internal fitness. It's not saying that we don't have to get rid of the leavening. We do, because that leavening represents something. That leavening represents what? Praise Yahweh. So the physical going through of removing the leavening from our houses and the leavened bread from our houses, it's a physical action for what we should be doing internally, which is doing what? Yes. It's cleansing ourselves, yes. Yes, praise Yahweh, absolutely. Getting rid of sin, getting ready, putting to death that old man, getting rid of those old practices, getting rid of those things that will separate us from Yahweh. And yes, there is physical preparation that goes along with that. And and this is and Pastor gets into that here in just a second. But there's also a physical separation from uncleanness that we do follow as well. But this word here continues to show. It says, many went out of the country, and went up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify, thereby making ready for the Passover, being internally prepared. And you can see there's a cross reference there of Yachanan 11:55. So not only are we getting rid of the sins within us, and the gathering and the going and the purging of our dwellings and our houses and our property of the leaven should be reminding us of what we're supposed to be doing. And that's where our mindset should be as we're cleaning and we're going through and we're searching for this stuff. Not, man, where'd that breadcrumb go? Man, this is crazy. I got to go through and do this. What's it reminding us? What's that reminder for us to do? That reminder for us shows just how easily sin can hide within us. It shows how easily it can hide within us. Because those little crumbs can get everywhere, and they can be tough to get out, just like certain habits and certain practices. Certain sins are harder to overcome than others. But it's the diligence and the effort that we put forth to get rid of those things. And this is all demonstrated as we go through and we physically get rid of the leavening, okay? Now, if we go back to the book here, it shows here, and Pastor shows they went up to cleanse themselves, okay? There's certain physical cleansing that goes on too. Men, keep yourselves free from the women for the last 3 days before Yeshua's memorial, okay? And that's also part of that cleansing process, is to separate us from anything that can cause us to become unclean, okay? And this is again, what Pastor's referring to here. He says, we'll have baptisms before Yeshua's memorial and this ceremony for those who are ready. He says, get here about 3 days early if you can. Start planning now. Get here 3 days early so you can cleanse yourself and get yourself ready for this. Okay? And that's really where we should be doing. We should be really thinking about those things. And he says we can see some great things that are going to take place this Passover. Think about the timing of this, which was written back here in 2003. Now think about what is being said here and what's being brought forth recently here about these things that are going to be coming to pass in a very, very short time now. There are some great things that are going to take place. It is getting really, really close now, and we can really see this. I certainly hope, he says, we'll introduce this new law. It's not a new law. It was new to us, but it's an ancient law. It's something we haven't been able to keep, but we're getting more prepared to do this all the time. Verse 4 here, he says that I desire that everyone would remember what Yahweh tells us to do. Come and seek the place that Yahweh has chosen. We can't keep the feast in every place that we want, but only at the place that Yahweh has chosen to establish his name. And we're to seek the habitation of Yahweh. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 5 through 7 and verse 14 show us that. To seek, and we have to seek that through prophecy. Okay, to seek the place that Yahweh has chosen to place his name, and there we must go. And there, what do? We come here and we go to the priest and we learn from the priest. We learn to do and to follow the instructions that we're given. That's why we come to the feast. We come here to learn how to reverence Yahweh. That's why we come to Yahweh's house. Because we weren't learning how to reverence Yahweh out in the world by any stretch of the imagination. And he says, do what they say, do not turn to the right or to the left. And we just read that in Deuteronomy chapter 17. And then he mentions here in verse 5, he says, honey is a wonderful thing, and I would say that you need honey and butter every day. Okay, we just read that, Isaiah 7:15, right? He says, I take it every day, and I've taken it almost every day of my life. And it was something that was put before us in dessert. We would have it for breakfast in the morning almost every day. We would have honey and butter and hot biscuits. So there's a multitude of ways that we can enjoy this. And not only is it an enjoyable thing to eat, but it's also very beneficial for our bodies and for the mind. And then he goes on, and Pastor goes on to describe the big bread pans and how that every morning that there wasn't anything left, and that's how great it was, that's how great these things were. In verse 6 here, he said we had biscuits and honey, and then he goes on and shows how they raided beehives in the summer and they got gallons of honey, and as far back as they can remember, they had cows, so they had fresh butter and fresh honey. Okay, and he says it's really something that Yahweh tells you to do. You really need to do it. Okay, verse 7 over here on the upper right-hand corner here, we need to highlight this. Okay, got your highlighters out? Highlight this. It says, do not cook honey because it ruins it. It kills it, and it causes it to become a poison to you. Do not cook the honey. Okay, so highlight that. Okay, very important. And Pastor has brought out, and it shows that, when honey is actually cooked, that it actually turns rancid. It creates some type of poison, and then the benefit is totally gone. He further goes to show here, he says that doesn't mean you can't warm it up, because pure honey will crystallize. And if you've seen it, if it sits for a long time, then it crystallizes. And so you need to heat it up, gently heat it up, so that, number one, it's not cooked, so that, number two, that you don't destroy the beneficial enzymes that are in it, because too high of a heat can do that. And that's been brought out many different times. And he says there's something wrong with the honey when you buy it in the stores, or else it would crystallize. He says most of it is not even made by bees. It can be labeled 100% pure honey, but it's never seen a bee. He says when they say pure honey, that just means it's made from several sources. It doesn't mean that it's honey made by bees. It's the bee honey is what you need to get, because it has the beneficial enzymes in it. It's got the royal jelly. It's got all of these live enzymes in it. And when they pasteurize it, when they prepare it in the stores, it kills all of that. It kills it, and it kills the benefit out of it. And he says you have to warm it up, but don't boil it. He says keep it way below the boiling point. And he says, in fact, you can actually set it in the sun, and it will turn from the crystal into the liquid. You can set it in hot water. You can set the jar in hot water, and it'll do the same thing. It'll do a similar thing. But just set it in the sun. Just set it in the windowsill. Set it in the sun, and it'll heat, and it'll go back into that liquid form. Okay, but it's important. It's really important about that. We've got to be careful with what we purchase in the stores, because the world is defiled. The world is defiled. Now, we have a tremendous blessing here, because we have an entire research team that goes through and researches the different items and stuff that are found in the stores. And they work very diligently and very hard to provide us with the clean and acceptable. What's clean and acceptable, what is not. Okay? And that goes with everything, you know. We have to be careful with, it even shows about, Pastor even questions about, it shows about the meat, about meat that we get. And if you look in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 25, it really kind of sums that up. It sums up what it is that we need to make sure that we do. 1 Corinthians 10:25 says, everything that is being sold in the meat market, do not eat. Okay? Just don't go out there and assume something's okay. But do not eat, but ask questions on the account of your conscience. Okay? You can call your counselors, you men that don't have the blessing of being here at Abel, where you can ask your counselors directly, where you can get where you have that immediate guidance. But you can call and speak to your counselors and ask for guidance when it comes to purchasing things out in the world. We have to be careful, men, with everything that we do, because the world is defiled and is contaminated. What's one reason here that we would have to ask about buying something that's in a butcher shop? Well, how was it processed? What was processed before it? Was there a pig that was processed before it? What was processed before it? Were the utensils clean? Were things done? Were things done to ensure there wasn't cross-contamination? We have to be very, very careful, and that is really, men, what we really have to be careful with that. Especially if we're away from Abel. Especially if we're not here at Abel. Ask at Abel. I cannot stress that enough. Go to the priest and ask for their decision. Ask, how can I assure that my family has clean meat? How can I assure that, what is it that I can do? Ask for their guidance. And the priest will guide you in these things. And men, it's about our diligence. It's about doing everything that we can to make sure that we are being submissive and doing the things that we need to do. There's things that can be done. Does the world, do they kosher their meat? By koshering their meat, do they soak it in salt water? The salt water has been known to draw out blood and draw out impurities. Do they do that? What is it that they do? What are some steps that can be taken? So that's why I can't emphasize that enough. But check, ask at Abel. Ask at Abel and ask for the guidance, and then follow that instruction. Okay, and so Pastor, he really goes through here, and he kind of just generalizes how things were done back in, during the time when the grocery stores didn't have refrigeration, how they would, how the meat and stuff would hang in the, would hang, and it would only be available for a certain time period. Okay, and that's kind of back over here in verse 15, over here on page 160. And so I was talking about that on verse 15 and verse 16 also. Something we need to be cautious and remember of also is when we do have meat, how long can we keep it before it's considered, before we have to get rid of it? How many days? Praise Yahweh, 3 days, right? A pastor shows here, he says, remember the law now, do not keep meat more than 3 days, after you've cooked it. So, and even with refrigeration, even with refrigeration, he shows that there's still things that get it, there's still things that get into it. The refrigeration doesn't stop it. It might slow it down, but it doesn't stop it. But the law tells us, no more than 3 days. Okay, and then he goes on further here. If we're on page 160, and down on verse 18, Pastor shows, he says, there are certain things that you can get to help enhance, our immune systems. There's certain foods and stuff that we can eat that are shown that there's definite health benefits. And the doctors know this, and the doctors will even, when you go to the doctor with certain things, they will even tell you, you need to start taking this, and this will help improve your numbers on these certain diseases. But one of the things Pastor shows over here, if you look here in verse 18 over here, he says that, yet Yeshua ate fish. He says Yeshua ate fish continually. And if you want to kind of look at that, that cross-reference there that he gives us is Luke 24:42-43. It says Yeshua ate fish continually. It was one of the few things that is reported that he did eat. He also ate red meat, and that's also recorded. And he was raised up on the laws of koshering meat. And I'm sure that more care was taken with it than you see, out in the world today. And then he also mentions here, he says you need cod liver oil, flaxseed oil, and vitamin E, wheat germ oil. And there are certain benefits and stuff that come from that. And this is some of the studies and stuff that are out there that have shown of what this cod liver oil, this flaxseed oil, the wheat germ oil, what they can possibly help with. If you take a look at the overhead there, some of the benefits of it, there are benefits to the skin, there's benefits to the hair. If you have hair, but there's some of it, what's a little bit there would be beneficial to. Cardiovascular health, they show that it can be beneficial for that. It can be beneficial for your digestive system, for your immune system. It can be beneficial for inflammation. It can be beneficial for a lot of different things. Okay, and that's what these studies that have been conducted have actually shown is that they can be beneficial for these things. But you take that and combine that, along with a scripturally clean diet, and you're going to be way ahead of where people are that refuse to follow the health laws that Yahweh gives us. Yahweh didn't give us these health laws just to do away with them. That's what they want you to think. That's what the world wants you to think. But these things are actually given to us for a reason. Pastor shows here, he says, if you have these things and you don't touch pork, we should experience certain health benefits, and we shouldn't fall to the same diseases and stuff that are out here in the world. At least we're going to have a better fighting possibility of not getting these things. Okay. And Pastor shows her in verse 20 here. He says, when I was working in the State Board of Health laboratory, we knew this. We knew the doctor would give you certain things, and it would cause the syphilis to hide and disappear from the surface. And remember that that's what they do. These drugs and stuff that are out there, they actually treat the symptoms. They don't treat the root cause of the disease. The root cause of the disease comes from following sin. It comes from following a lustful way of life. That's where syphilis and stuff comes from. It comes from following those things. It doesn't come from keeping the law of Yahweh. It comes from sin. It comes from violating that law. Remember, a curse causeless will not come. But when they give these certain antibiotics, it causes these things to disappear from the surface. But then it goes and it hides in your body, and it can come back a year or so, or 50 years, or even longer than that. I knew somebody several years ago that had cancer. And this individual, went to the doctor, and it was at a teaching hospital. It was at a university teaching hospital. And this doctor came in, and it wasn't long. I don't think it was long after this sermon was given, to be honest with you. It might have been 3 years after that, but Pastor had been teaching it for years. And this doctor came in and told this individual that okay, the type of cancer you have is this, but it didn't manifest here. It showed up over here in a different part of your body. And he says, and that's because these things will go and they will hide. And they will pop up somewhere else. Okay? This is what the doctor told this individual. I heard it come right out of the doctor's out of their own mouth. Because he got down and he looked at the individual right in the eyes and says, this is going to sound crazy, but this is how this works. This is what these diseases do. But you know what? Pastor brought it out first. Pastor brought it out before they came out and said that. So, but that's how these things work. You know, that's what they do. That's what these diseases do, and they can hide, and they can. You can think you haven't got anything, and then 50 years later or longer come back. And Pastor shows it can come back in your lungs, in your eyes, in your heart, and it can cause you to have a heart attack. That's the reason that we have to take care of ourselves. That's why we have to do certain things, to make sure that we don't compound anything that might already be within us from the sins that we committed before we came to Yahweh's house, or from the things that have been passed down from generation to generation. He says you need to get this stuff out of your body that you possibly can. We need to do this before Passover, okay? So highlight this next paragraph here. It says, remember that honey and butter. Remember that honey and butter. This will help you accept righteousness, learn to hate evil, and face it, and to scold it when it comes to you, okay? And again, that cross-reference there is one of those that we looked at already. This cross-reference is Isaiah 7:15 is where it mentions that. Then Pastor shows here, he continues in verse 22, he says, we have a letter here, except to tell you that someone questioned food being served on the Sabbath. And then Pastor shows, he says, we have plans on bringing the food administration of the kingdom of Yahweh to you so that you can understand that. And he shows that there is much in the Holy Scriptures showing this. And then he says, brethren, I guarantee you. Now, take this for anybody that, and Yahweh willing, there's nobody here this way, but for people that might be listening. But take this next sentence to heart here. He says, brethren, I guarantee it would not be done if we were not absolutely sure that this wasn't in the kingdom that Yahweh set up. It wouldn't be doing if there was any doubt that there was something wrong with that. It would not be done. Plain, end of story. Okay? End of story. It would not be done if there was any doubt. This is the way it's going to be done in the kingdom. Yahweh Shammai. He says we're not doing anything that is not Yahweh's will, and will not do anything that is not of Yahweh's will. Okay? Rest assured that that is absolutely what is going to take place, and what is taking place. Now, some of the scriptures where that talks about that, one scripture in particular here, it talks about that here in Nehemiah. Here in Nehemiah, chapter 8, verses 10 to 12. Here's one example of this, and it says, Nehemiah said to them, go and enjoy your rich food and your sweet drinks, and send some to those who have nothing prepared. This day is holy to Yahweh. Do not grieve nor sorrow, for your joy in Yahweh is your strength. The Levites also urged the people not to grieve, saying, hold your peace, for this day is holy. Do not grieve. Then all the people went away to eat and to drink, and to share portions, and to rejoice at this great feast of trumpets. For they understood the things that were revealed to them. You know, we got to remember, the Sabbath, what is it that we're learning to do on the Sabbath? What's the main, what are we learning to do on the Sabbath? Rejoice and do what? Praise Yahweh. Rejoice and to serve. There's many different ways that we can serve one another in Yahweh's house on Yahweh's Sabbath. Serving the food, making sure people enjoy their Sabbath is one. Okay? There's many, like I said, there's many, many other ways. He says, one of the apostles was inspired to write, they feast with you, and they speak evil of things that they know nothing of. He says they read their Bible for 4 hours, and they wind up condemning the priests who Yahweh tells them to go and do what they say. Okay, look at what's written here in Yada chapter 1, verse 10 through 12. But notice here what it says. It says, but these speak evil of those things which they do not understand. Why don't they understand? I'll bet you they didn't go to the priest and ask. I bet they already had their mind made up of what the right answer was in their mind before they went to ask. You know, when we go to our counselors, we have to be prepared to receive the answer that they give us. Whether or not we think we already know the answer, they're going to give us the correct answer. Okay? And then in verse 11 there it says, woe to them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and they have run greedily in the error of Balaam for reward, and they have perished in the rebellion. Notice, in the rebellion of Korah. These are spots in your feast of love and Yahweh's feast. And when they feast with you, they, without fear, serving only themselves. They're not interested in serving others, but serving themselves as they are clouds without water, driven about by the winds. You know, you think about they're clouds without water. They're driven about by the wind. You know, you think about the way the being tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. But they're driven about by the winds. Autumn trees without fruit. They don't bear fruit. Twice dead, pulled up by the roots. Okay? And that goes right along, man. That goes right along with 2 Kepha chapter 3, verse 16, which tells us that the unlearned and the unstable, what do they do with the scriptures? Praise Yahweh. Yes, they twist them as they do the other scriptures to their own destruction. Okay, so remember, when we go to the priest, you know, we have to go with the intent to learn and with the intent to obey, even if we don't understand. Yahweh tells us that we're to keep the law, right? Right? I mean, that's what we're told. We're told to keep the law. Is there anywhere in the scripture that tells us, keep the law if you understand it? If you don't understand it, don't worry about it. Buck up against it. Rebel against it. Speak evil against it. He doesn't say that anywhere. Because, first comes obedience, and then comes the understanding. You know, when we started practicing serving one another on the Sabbath, the more we do it, the more we understand, and the more joy that we actually get through serving one another on Yahweh's Sabbath, or the feast days, or at any other time that our service is called. You know, it's not just limited to the Sabbath. But Pastor shows here, he says they wind up condemning the priest who Yahweh tells them to go, to go to, and then do what they say. Then he says they make worse fools out of themselves than they were before opening their mouths. If chomping at the bit were breaking the Sabbath, these guys would be breaking every Sabbath that comes along with their stupid gossip. Okay? All right, we got some highlighting to do. Got your highlighters ready? Okay, here we go. Highlight this. This is the finishing work that will gain the power. Remember that, to raise the dead and the power to rule the universe. Highlight that. Highlight that. Think about it. I mean, think about what is being said here. This is the finishing work. Pastor said we've got less than 2 years, and this work is going to be completely finished. That will gain the power, remember that, to raise the dead and the power to rule the universe. Take a look in Yeketskeh chapter 37. And with that in mind, with what's being said here, to raise the dead. If you want to, I mean, you can just kind of close your eyes. You can kind of think about what's being said here and imagine that this is going to be done in less than 2 years by this house. And then he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O Father Yahweh, you know. Again he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of Yahweh. Now think about what Pastor's been teaching us about the microorganisms, about how this resurrection is going to take place. This just sends chills up my back. It says, this is what Father Yahweh says to the bones, to these bones. Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and you will live. I will lay sinews upon you, bringing flesh upon you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you will live, and you will know that I am Yahweh. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise. There was a noise, and behold, a shaking, and the bones came together, bone to his bone. And when I looked, lo, the sinews and the flesh came upon them, and the skin covered over them, but there was no breath in them. And then he said to me, prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man, and say to the breath, this is what Father Yahweh says. Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, so that they may live. And so I prophesied as he commanded me. And the breath came into them, and they lived. And they stood upon their feet, an exceedingly vast army. Think about that, man. Think about the authority. Think about the power that is demonstrated there to actually bring our brothers and sisters and those who have gone before us back from the grave. This is some serious stuff that we're dealing with. And it's not that far off. And it's not that far off. But this finishing work, this is part of that finishing work. And it's that important for us to put our hands to the plow and not do like Lot's wife did and look back and long for the ways of Egypt and long for the ways of the ways that we left behind. Because men, those ways that we left behind are bringing about this destruction that we're going to be seeing here in the very next few months. That we're seeing it now. But very soon, that third part of man over that fourth part of the earth, this great nuclear burning, and that's going to be a small one compared to the big one. But yet the effects are going to be devastating. But we have to go through that. We're going to be proving ourselves throughout this thing. And Yahweh shows and prophesies, and he knows that we're going to come out on top. All we have to do is believe into the one that Yahweh has sent to give to us, to teach us, and all we have to do is simply submit and obey and do what he instructs us to do. That's it. That's all we have to do. Now, if we go back to the book here, it says, we'll have power like Yahweh. He has called us to that purpose to manage the whole universe. This world has no idea why they have been called. They have no idea why they've been put on the face of the earth. Yahweh has called us here. You are going to be put over the entire universe. You're going to manage the universe. You're going to be put as managers over everything that he has created to manage these things. Now, what in the world, what in the world is a manager? What's a manager? A manager. Look what a manager is. A manager is a person responsible for controlling or administrating all or part of a company or organization. Men, we're qualifying for those positions now. We all have been placed. We've been placed into certain positions within the work of Yahweh. In some way, somewhere, we are managing a certain portion of that. Be it if we're managing part of a work crew. If we're a member of a work crew, we are managing the very task that we are dealing with. We're doing that. We're proving that we can be, we're proving to Yahweh that we can be given instructions and follow those instructions. Because Yahweh has to know that to whom he gives instructions to can be trusted to carry out those instructions, or else that individual will never be placed into a position of a manager like that. Okay? He has to know. He has to know that we can be trusted above all else. And that's why we have to go through these tests. That's why these things are coming upon us, okay? And the test is going to seem so minuscule when we get back to what we just saw back here in Yakutsk. I mean, it's going to seem like that was a piece of cake. Think about how insurmountable it seemed when we first came to Yahweh's house. Oh man, I got to leave this job. I'm not going to do that. But yet we took that step, and now we look back at it and say, well, that wasn't bad. Yahweh brought me through that. Yahweh brought us through that. Yahweh's going to bring us through everything if we're just obedient and we do what he instructs us to do. Okay, so highlight this here, okay? Highlight the rest of this paragraph. You're going to be put as managers over everything that he has created. That is the reason he said in Hebrews that it was needful for him to bring many sons to this glory, because we have a tremendous job to do, a job that's not being done right now. Yahweh created us to fulfill that job. So he called us to fill those positions. Okay, and if you want another cross-reference, you can look at Hebrews chapter 2, verse 10. Okay, Yahweh created, top of page 161, Yahweh created something to fulfill everything that needs to be done. No matter how small it is, no matter how little it appears, Yahweh has created something to fulfill everything that needs to be done. He's talked about, about the maggots. He created the maggot to go and lay an egg to start a process, so that certain, start a process that would. He created the maggot to go in and to lay an egg to start a deterioration process of a certain thing that would contaminate the earth. In other words, it would turn it back into something else that was usable, that the earth could be used from. And he has that maggot doing this thing and enjoying life to the fullest. And he has shown that. He says there's the same contamination in the universe. He says we see it. Science can see it. And they know there is chaos out there. Now highlight this next portion here. Highlight this. It says they see actual wars going on. It's like the 6-day war that had to be fought to cast out Satan and to destroy the transmitting process that was reaching the earth constantly. This was done and she was expelled. So you want to highlight that portion there, okay? You need to highlight that portion there. So some of her group went with her, and they are still very active in the minds of certain individuals today. While some feast with you, they will try to draw you away from Yahweh's house. Go back to what 2 Timaiah. 2 Timaiah chapter 3, verse 6 shows. Okay, 2 Timaiah chapter 3, verse 6, it says, "For they are the sort who creep into the houses of Yahweh, and they lead away," notice that word, "silly women, who are loaded down with sins and captured by various lusts." Now, this shows here that silly women, it means it's a term of contempt for weak-willed, faithless men and women. So it's actually a term of contempt for weak-willed, for faithless men and women. So faithless individuals, whether they're man or woman, it doesn't matter. Okay, but that's what that means, that silly women. And Pastor mentioned again, he said, you need the things, that he just mentioned. You can get with Life Nutrition. You can get with your counselors. Okay, what kind of things, can I get that will help me through this? And the priests and your counselors will guide you into this. There are certain things, essential oils are one thing, and using essential oils, it's not a sin. There are some people that try to teach against it, but they are natural. They're naturally occurring things that were used. And there's many benefits in these things that are used. Yahweh inspired them. Yahweh inspired them to be combined and to be used for his people in anointing in the kingdom that was set up by Moshe. Everything that's set up in Yahweh's house, is actually set up according to a pattern, the same pattern that was shown to Moshe on the mountain. And I'm getting ahead of myself here because that's actually toward the end of this page over here. But it shows here, he says, the prophet Daniel did without anointing oils for 3 weeks, and he did without meat for 3 weeks, and he did without these essential oils for 3 weeks, and certain other things because he was in mourning. He says the house of Yahweh has established right now. He says we are the pillar and ground of the truth. Highlight that. He says that we are the pillar and ground of the truth. Anybody know where that's written? Okay, yep. 1 Timothy 3:15. He says we are the pillar and ground of the truth. He testifies for us that we are doing the right things. He says, I know your works, and you have kept my word and have not denied my name. This goes right along with the 7-lamp lampstand that we see here in Zechariah chapter 4. Now, Yahweh shows in the last day's work, he shows the last day's work going to Oklahoma, and we covered some of this here a few chapters back about pastor being called an Okie and how Okie was actually a term of contempt. But it actually carries a truly wonderful meaning. It says, when the scriptures were written, there was no such name. And apparently, he inspired the name and knew it would be. He said, that should be no surprise to you. He knew you. Now think about this. Yahweh knew us before we were born. We were in the plan of Yahweh. In the beginning was the plan of Yahweh, and we were in that plan. So he knew us before we were born, and he set a time when Spirit Holy would set off an alarm in our head, and we would have our minds opened up to an understanding where we would say, oh yeah, the first day of the week, the first day is not the 7th day of the week. The first day is not the 7th day of the week, or the worldly Sunday is not the 7th day of the week. Says, how could I have been so stupid? It's that realization that, well, why didn't I see that before? He says the 7th day is actually the 7th day after all. Wow! I know that that's really hard to understand, but the world is filled with deception as we see, and we've been and have all seen up until this time, and we will see more of it as time grows closer. And we're seeing more and more of the confusion. We're seeing more and more of the deception that is out in the world. It is mind-boggling how people can't think. And I hear things, where I will hear people say certain things, and it's like, did that just come out of your mouth? I mean, it was just like, they can't see it. They can't see the very confusion and stuff that they're in. But we see it because we've been called out of it. Now, if we go back to the book here, it says, verse 30 here, it says, what if the sick pope today was suddenly healed? You think about this. What if there was a sick pope was suddenly healed? Would that make a difference to salvation? Would that make a difference to us if we saw that? Would you suddenly say, wow, this man is healed. Wow, he looks so young. What if he died? And all of a sudden sits up as if he's resurrected. Then what would you think? What would you say? Would that say that? Would that say that what the Catholic Church and all of Christianity is doing is righteousness? Would that change anything? Would that change anything at all in righteousness and who will actually live forever and enter into the kingdom? You might see some things like this, so keep it in mind. Think about that. Pastor warned about this, I know, several times before. But if you think about what's written in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Satan works through her ministers, works through mankind, works through certain individuals. And she works with all deceivableness of sin. And she works with all power, with all signs of power, all power, all signs, and with these lying words. And Pastor has said, before, we've got to watch out, because what would take place if somebody was if it appeared that somebody was resurrected? And they told you, the house of Yahweh is wrong. You need to follow the Pope over here. You need to follow the 7 hills of Rome. I'm living proof now. You see, that doesn't change anything. That doesn't change of what is righteous and what is not. What is written in the book of Yahweh, man, you got to remember, what is written there, that is our life insurance policy. Because we're going to be judged out of everything that's written according to the words that are written in the books. And we're going to be judged out of those things that are written in the books. Okay, if some apparent dead pope or dead individual appeared to rise from the grave and tell you, you need to worship on the first day of the week, Sunday, that's the way to do it, that's the proof, and he was living proof of that, that goes contrary to what the scriptures teach. But Pastor says, keep that in mind, because we might see something like that. He continues here in verse 31, here on page 161, he says, here in Zechariah, Yahweh gives you this lampstand that we're studying in Revelation 11, chapter 11, chapter 6, and chapter 10, where he shows that this is the last work, when you will hear the voice, that shows that this is the last work. Now highlight the rest of this paragraph here. Highlight the rest of this paragraph. It says, when you hear the 7th voice of this lampstand pouring this oil out to a congregation, then he says, this is the finishing work. This is the last work of Yahweh, and there is no other. He said, if it's not according to the prophecies, it's because there is no light there. Yahweh didn't inspire it. This is plain and simple. Of course, if it's not according to the word, Yahweh will have no work unless he prophesies it in advance by his servants, the prophets. Okay, and that comes from Amos chapter 3, verse 7, if you want to cross-reference that. And he says, and if it's not according to the prophecies, if they speak not according to the law and the prophecies, it's because there is no light in them, right? So we see that in Isaiah chapter 8 and verse 20. Okay, so like I said, highlight that whole area there. Zechariah 4:1, and the Malach who talked with me, that is the messenger who talks with me, came again and wakened me as a man who is wakened out of his sleep, and said to me, what do you see? So I said, I see and behold a lampstand all of gold with its bowl for oil on the top of it, with its 7 lamps on it, and there are 7 pipes with its 7 lamps. Now this is what Revelation 1 said. Now highlight this next part here. It said Yeshua is standing in the midst of these. He is standing in the midst and has control of these works. So highlight that part there. Highlight that there. It said that Yeshua is standing in the midst of these, and he is standing in the midst and has control of these works. Okay, and that's Revelation chapter 1, verse 13, if you want to cross-reference that. Then Pastor continues, he says, he is the one who gave testimony that we are doing this thing, that we are doing the right thing, and are going to do the right thing, okay? So he is the one who gives us testimony that we are doing the right thing and that we are going to do the right thing. He is the one who is working closely with the 7th Malach at this time, who is leading and guiding this house and is going to lead, guide, and direct this house through this time of great tribulation that was soon going to be upon the earth, and to usher in this great and awesome kingdom of Yahweh. So that is who is leading and guiding and directing this work at this time. Okay? All right, men. So let's, I think we're at a pretty decent stopping point. So we'll stop here. We'll pick up here on verse 33 next week, okay? So, Yahweh be with you, men. Yahweh bless you. Yahweh bless your work week. Yahweh keep you safe from the trouble and from the trials and everything that this world is going through. And looking forward to next Sabbath.